More than 2 million people with mental health problems struggled with debt during the pandemic and thought about ending it all. People with mental illness were 3 times more likely than the wider population to have money troubles and twice as likely to be borrowing for essential things like food and heating. Those are the findings in a report from the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute. It's the charity set up by Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert. He feels really passionately about all this, and we'll hear from him in a minute. But first, I want you to hear Rob. He was one of the 6,000 people who took part in the study. He's 55, and he says that mental illness has robbed him of a comfortable life.
I lived in a 5-bedroom house with a swimming pool and a 4x4 and flew business class and never worried about money.
How does your mental illness lead to money troubles, Rob?
So it's in 2 ways. So the first is that when I begin to become unwell, I don't control my spending. I become quite compulsive, which can be things like going on eBay and getting involved in bids for things you don't need, or walking past a shop and just getting something that you can't actually afford. And when I'm very unwell, I can't open bills. I can't manage my money. And I can get really, really anxious about things like my electricity or putting petrol in the car.
How did all that take away from you then, the house and the 4x4 and the swimming pool and everything?
I was married, and then my partner and I separated in 2014, sorry. And I moved out of the house and into a rental. Then I couldn't work. Then I ran through my savings. And then I ended up attempting to take my own life.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
How have you managed in the pandemic, Rob?
It was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Well, first off, the government decided that people like me wouldn't get the uplift.
You were on old benefits, were you? So you didn't get the £20 on the universal credit, I understand.
But what it also meant is I couldn't go shopping in the same way, because I know all the times to go to the supermarkets to get the discount food. And that wasn't really possible during the pandemic. I tried doing online shopping, but then I'd have to blow my budget to get a delivery and then pay for a delivery. And added to that, I was completely isolated. There was no face-to-face therapy. And I think I had 2 people visit my house over the entire pandemic. One was the gas man to check my boiler, and the other was a man to put in a new smoke alarm.
What was your lowest point?
My mum had to go in for a heart operation during the pandemic, and I couldn't go and see her. And I sat on my couch and cried and thought, well, why am I even trying anymore?
What pulled you through this time when your mum was in hospital and you couldn't go to visit her and you felt, you couldn't go on, you'd endured it long enough?
I've been lucky enough that I've been able to join a 3-year treatment program, and I knew that was coming.
So hope.
Some hope, yeah. And then a really small thing that probably what your listeners will think is odd. During the pandemic, I had a phone call from my energy provider about my tariff, and I'm on their vulnerable list. And we talked through my options, and at the end of the call, this lady said something really powerful. She went, "Are you in a state to be able to take out this contract?" The fact that a provider who was aware of my situation would double check that I was okay to take this on was really, really powerful for me.
Why?
Because 1, it helped me check that I was okay to do this, and 2, it said they cared. And if you compare that to a telephone company that phoned me to tell me I needed to change my contract, and I ended up getting a second cell phone contract, and then was told I'd have to pay nearly £700 to get out of it a week after I'd come out of a hospital, it's just the difference in how companies treat people with mental health problems.
Martin Lewis, what do you think about Rob's story?
Well, first of all, I think Rob is incredibly brave, and I'm very thankful for him for sharing his story. And the fact that he is an intelligent, successful man who suffered a mental illness, I think just shines a light on this could be anyone's situation. I'm also very pleased to hear that one essential service provider, the energy firm, actually did it right. And the charity, the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute, we actually have mental health accessibility auditing that we do on large financial and essential utility firms. And it's something that we're growing to try and get them to have processes in place so that they do the right thing when people have mental health problems. Because administration anxiety is very difficult for some people that they are simply unable to deal, especially when they're having a catastrophic mental health problem with the normal day-to-day admin that the rest of us struggle with anyway. But also it's worth noting that for some people a text is a nightmare, for others a text is the only way they can communicate. For some people face-to-face is a nightmare, for others with mental health problems face-to-face is the only way that they could communicate, and so on. So starting to understand the differences and the way that different people with mental health problems work and different mental health conditions work, and putting those all into place is crucial within our big financial institutions and our essential services sector. Of course, every business should be doing it, but we have to start on the ones that are most difficult to avoid.
The charity talked to 6,000 people. This figure in the report, the 2.5 million people with a mental illness thought of ending it all in the pandemic. How did they arrive at that figure?
Okay, so it did a statistically representative survey on 6,000 people, 5,000 of whom had mental health problems. And then the 2.5 million figure is a macroed up figure that if those numbers were right and it was representative across society, it would be 2.5 million people. We, of course, haven't spoken to 2.5 million people and would not claim it, and we don't in the press release,
No.
I should note. But it's 44% of people with mental health problems who fell behind on payments during the pandemic considered or attempted suicide. And if you macro that up to the UK population, that would be 2.5 million people. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't find that figure surprising when the team sent it to me. We know that every year in England alone, for financial reasons, on a normal year, 400,000 people will consider taking their own lives, and one of the causes of who when they're in financial problems. So during a pandemic year, which both exacerbated many people's financial problems and exacerbated many people's mental health conditions, that isn't that much of a surprise, although it is, of course, a shock and a terrible thing and something that we need to try and sort out.
We spoke to the Department of Health about this, and they mentioned the breathing space scheme where people in a mental health crisis will be protected from enforcement action and given debt advice. Do people who are mentally ill know about that, Martin?
Well, it's a new scheme, and it was actually a policy that the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute instituted, and it was something that we came up with and we campaigned for, and we were delighted and very thankful with the government for putting it into place. In a way, though, that is only for people in NHS crisis care, and it is something that we're working through the system, so it is done for people. So it's not such an issue that people don't know about it. I think this is far wider. That the breathing space scheme is something in general that people with debts now can go and get 6 odd weeks of, creditors can't touch them and can't chase them, and they have time to sort their life out. And the mental health crisis care that we call recovery space, although it's not its official name, is where that's in a way help those who are in NHS crisis mental health care will get it done with them and for them. But this is a far, far bigger issue. One of the problems we discovered is a worrying number of people with mental health and debt problems missed out on COVID-related support measures. 18% of people with mental health problems fell behind on water payments, but only 6% were able to access a water payment holiday. 17% of people with mental health problems missed credit card payments, but only 7% accessed a credit payment holiday. And there are many reasons for this. First, many were unaware of the support. Then, some struggled to contact essential services providers due to crippling admin anxiety. as we heard from Rob, mental health problems can also target your impulses. They can make you feel invulnerable when, of course, you're not. They can give you reduced concentration. They can give you memory problems, and they can make it extremely difficult to manage money at the best of times. And when you piece this ugly jigsaw together of the effect that mental health can have on your financial situation, you can see why our call is for more support. And there's just something I think people find interesting. It's almost a thought debate, probably better for the moral maze than here. But our statistics show that it is possible that 50% or more of those of whom have bailiffs come to their door with debts have a mental health issue. Now, currently, we work on the presumption that people are not vulnerable and they have to declare vulnerability. But is it a question for society when you start to look at those stats, and they're not firmed up, so I'm not making a statement, I'm raising this as a question, that if the majority of people who bailiffs on, the majority of doors who bailiffs knock on are people with mental health problems, should we start with a presumption of vulnerability? And these are some of the very difficult issues that we're going to have to contend with and debate going forward.
Martin Lewis, thank you. And if